The metal handcuffs clicked around my wrists as I stood in my own driveway, watching my 12-year-old daughter Sarah press her face against our living room window. Sheriff Karen smirked as she tightened the cuffs deliberately, her voice dripping with satisfaction. "You should have kept your mouth shut about my methods," she whispered. "Now your little girl gets to see what happens to troublemakers in my town." What she did not know was that I had been recording everything, and that I was not just some small-town mechanic she could intimidate. I was a federal agent. For 3 years, I had been living a lie in Millbrook, population 8,400. To everyone in this sleepy town, I was Jake Morrison, a divorced mechanic who ran the local auto repair shop on Main Street. I fixed their transmissions, changed their oil, and listened to their complaints about everything from property taxes to the high school football team's losing streak. Every morning at 7:30, I would drive my daughter Sarah to Millbrook Elementary in my beat-up Ford pickup. She would chatter about her friends, her teachers, and whatever science project was capturing her brilliant 12-year-old mind that week. Those 15-minute drives were the most genuine part of my fabricated life. "Dad, did you know that Jupiter has 79 moons?" she asked one Tuesday morning, her backpack stuffed with library books about space exploration. "I did not know that," I replied, smiling at her enthusiasm. "You are going to ace that astronomy test." Sarah beamed as she climbed out of the truck. "Pick me up at 3:15, okay? I want to show you my project when we get home." "Would not miss it," I promised, watching her disappear through the school's front doors. What Sarah did not know was that her father was actually Special Agent Jake Morrison, currently 3 years deep into the most important undercover operation of my career. Hidden beneath oil-stained coveralls and calloused hands was a federal badge and 15 years of experience investigating organized crime, corruption, and drug trafficking. My garage was more than just a repair shop. Behind the legitimate business front, sophisticated surveillance equipment monitored communications across 3 counties. Late at night, after Sarah was asleep, I would receive encrypted calls from my handlers, updating them on the progress of Operation Clean Sweep. The target was not some mob boss or cartel leader. It was the entire power structure of Millbrook and the surrounding county. For decades, a network of corrupt officials had been using their positions to enrich themselves while terrorizing anyone who dared to question their authority. At the center of this web sat Sheriff Karen Mitchell, a woman whose badge had become a weapon of personal vengeance and petty tyranny. She ruled her department like a medieval fiefdom, demanding absolute loyalty while crushing anyone who challenged her iron grip on local law enforcement. My first encounter with Sheriff Karen had been deliberately orchestrated 6 months earlier. I had run a stop sign near the courthouse, giving her a reason to pull me over and establish contact. The traffic stop revealed everything I needed to know about her character. "License and registration," she had demanded, her hand resting on her service weapon despite the minor nature of the violation. "Yes, ma'am," I had replied, playing the role of a nervous civilian. She had taken her time examining my documents, clearly enjoying the power dynamic. "Jake Morrison, you are the new mechanic, right? Bought the old Peterson place on Elm Street." "That is correct, Sheriff." "Well, Jake Morrison, let me give you some advice about living in my town. We do things a certain way here. People who follow the rules get along just fine. People who cause trouble," she had paused meaningfully, "they usually find somewhere else to live. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, ma'am, crystal clear." That conversation had confirmed what federal investigators already suspected. Sheriff Karen Mitchell was not just corrupt, she was dangerous. And now, After 3 years of careful preparation, we were finally ready to bring down her entire operation. But first, I had to maintain my cover just a little longer. I had to keep being the devoted single father who tucked his daughter into bed each night and helped her with homework at the kitchen table. I had to keep pretending that changing brake pads was the most dangerous thing I did for a living. Because the moment Sheriff Karen discovered who I really was, both Sarah and I would be in mortal danger. Tuesday, October 15th, started like any other morning. Sarah was excited about presenting her solar system project to her science class, complete with a detailed model of Saturn's rings that we had constructed together the previous weekend. "Do you think Mrs. Henderson will like it?" she asked as we pulled into the school parking lot. "She is going to love it," I assured her. "You worked harder on this project than most graduate students work on their dissertations." Sarah laughed at my exaggeration and gathered her materials. "See you at 3:15, Dad." "Would not miss it for the world." Those were the last words I spoke to my daughter as a free man. The call came at 2:45 in the afternoon. I was underneath a Chevy Suburban, replacing a worn-out exhaust system, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Millbrook Elementary School. "Mr. Morrison, this is Principal Davis. I need you to come to the school immediately." Something in her tone made my blood run cold. "What happened? Is Sarah okay?" "We need to discuss Sarah's situation in person. Can you come now?" I was out from under that Suburban and in my truck before she finished speaking. The drive to the school normally took 8 minutes. I made it in 4, my mind racing through every possible scenario. Principal Davis met me at the front entrance, her face pale and her hands shaking slightly. "Mr. Morrison, I am so sorry. There has been a terrible misunderstanding." "Where is my daughter?" Sarah was removed from school earlier today by Sheriff Mitchell. She presented documentation from Child Protective Services indicating immediate safety concerns. The words hit me like a physical blow. "What kind of safety concerns? What are you talking about?" "The sheriff said there had been anonymous reports about your fitness as a parent. She had a court order for emergency removal pending a welfare investigation." I fought to keep my voice steady, though every instinct screamed at me to start breaking things. "You let someone take my daughter without calling me first." "Mr. Morrison, she is the sheriff. She had legal documentation. We had no choice but to comply with the court order." "Show me the paperwork." Principal Davis handed me a folder containing official-looking documents bearing the seal of the county courthouse. The signatures looked legitimate, but something felt wrong. The formatting was slightly off. The language was too aggressive for standard CPS procedures. "Where did they take her?" "I do not know. The sheriff said it was confidential pending the investigation." I was already pulling out my phone, dialing Sarah's cell number. It went straight to voicemail. I tried 3 more times with the same result. "Mr. Morrison, I am sure this is just a misunderstanding that will be cleared up quickly." But I knew better. This was not a misunderstanding. This was Sheriff Karen Mitchell making her move, using my daughter as a weapon against me. But why now? What had triggered her suspicion? I drove straight to the sheriff's department, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. The federal agent in me understood that I needed to be careful, to maintain my cover and gather intelligence before acting. But the father in me wanted to kick down every door in that building until I found my little girl. The receptionist at the front desk looked up nervously as I approached. "Can I help you?" "I need to speak with Sheriff Mitchell immediately. She took my daughter from school today." Let me see if she is available. 5 minutes passed, then 10. Finally, Sheriff Karen emerged from her office, flanked by two deputies. Her expression was a mixture of satisfaction and barely concealed hostility. "Mr. Morrison, I was wondering when you would show up. Where is my daughter?" "Sarah is in protective custody, while we investigate some very serious allegations about your home environment." "What allegations? From who?" "That information is confidential, but I can tell you that we take child welfare very seriously in this county." The way she said it, with that smug smile playing at the corners of her mouth, told me everything I needed to know. This was personal. This was revenge for something, though I could not yet figure out what had exposed me. "I want to see her now." "That is not possible. Visitation will be determined by the court." "Then I want to speak with Child Protective Services." "They will contact you when appropriate." I stood there in that lobby, surrounded by her deputies, feeling more helpless than I had ever felt in my life. Every fiber of my being wanted to reveal who I really was, to call in federal backup and end this charade immediately. But I could not yet, because if I blew my cover now, Sarah might disappear forever. I spent that first night packing my empty house, fighting every instinct that told me to storm back into that sheriff's department with my service weapon drawn. Sarah's bedroom door stood open, her astronomy books still scattered across her desk where she had left them that morning. By sunrise, I had made my decision. I was going to confront Sheriff Karen directly, push her until she revealed her true motives, and hopefully make a mistake that would give me the opening I needed. The sheriff's department occupied a squat brick building on the outskirts of downtown Millbrook. I arrived at 8 o'clock sharp, when I knew Karen would be starting her daily routine of intimidating subordinates and abusing her authority. "I want to see Sheriff Mitchell," I told the receptionist. "Do you have an appointment?" "She will want to see me." 20 minutes later, I was sitting across from Karen in her office, studying the woman who had stolen my daughter. She was younger than I had expected when I first began investigating her, probably in her early 40s, with prematurely gray hair and cold blue eyes that seemed to catalog every detail for future use against me. "Mr. Morrison, I trust you slept well. Where is Sarah?" "Your daughter is safe and being well cared for. That is all you need to know right now." "I have a right to know where my child is being held." Karen leaned back in her chair, clearly enjoying my desperation. "Actually, you do not. When Child Protective Services determines that a child is in immediate danger, parental rights become secondary to child welfare." "What immediate danger? What possible threat could a 12-year-old girl face in her own home?" "Anonymous reports indicated drug activity on your property, possible weapons violations, concerns about your stability as a single parent." Each accusation was delivered with clinical precision, designed to sound official while remaining vague enough to be unprovable. But I caught the subtle tells, the slight hesitation before mentioning drugs, the way her eyes shifted when she mentioned weapons. "Anonymous reports from who?" "That information is protected, but I can tell you that multiple concerned citizens have expressed worry about your daughter's welfare." "Multiple concerned citizens in a town where I barely know anyone beyond my customers." "People notice things, Mr. Morrison. They see patterns. They make observations." "What patterns? What observations?" Karen stood and walked to her window, gazing out at the parking lot with the air of someone surveying her personal kingdom. "Late-night visitors to your garage. Strange vehicles coming and going at odd hours. equipment that seemed sophisticated for a simple auto repair business. My blood turned to ice. She had been watching me. Somehow, despite 3 years of careful operational security, Sheriff Karen Mitchell had identified me as a threat to her operation. I work late sometimes. People drop off cars at all hours. I fail to see how that constitutes a child welfare emergency. There is also the matter of your background, Mr. Morrison. Your story does not quite add up. What story? A divorced mechanic from Detroit moves to rural Pennsylvania to start over. Claims to want a quiet life for his daughter. But his repair shop generates more income than most small businesses in town. His personal habits suggest training and experience that go beyond automotive repair. She turned back to face me, and I saw something dangerous flickering in those cold eyes. Tell me, Mr. Morrison, what did you really do before you came to Millbrook? I maintained my composure, though my mind was racing through contingency plans. I worked for General Motors in Detroit, supervisory position. When the plant closed, I took my severance and pension to start fresh somewhere my daughter could grow up safe. Is that so? Because I made some phone calls to Detroit. Very interesting what I discovered. What did you discover? Jake Morrison did work for General Motors, but he died in a car accident 18 months before you arrived in Millbrook. The silence stretched between us, heavy with mutual understanding. She knew, maybe not exactly who I was, but she knew I was not who I claimed to be. Identity theft is a serious federal crime, Mr. Morrison, or whatever your real name is. You are fishing, Sheriff, making accusations you cannot prove. Am I? Well, here is what I can prove. I can prove that you have been living under false pretenses in my county. I can prove that you have been operating a business using fraudulent identification. And I can prove that your daughter is better off in protective custody until we sort out exactly who you really are. Karen returned to her desk and pressed the intercom button. Deputy Collins, please escort Mr. Morrison from the building. This is not over. Oh, but it is. You see, this is my town. These are my people, my courthouse, my judges, my social workers. You are just some outsider with a fake identity and a missing past. Do you really think you can win a fight against me on my own territory? Deputy Collins appeared in the doorway, hand resting casually on his sidearm. Sir, I need you to come with me. As I walked out of that building, I could feel Karen's satisfied gaze burning into my back. She thought she had won. She thought she had successfully neutralized whatever threat I represented to her corrupt little empire. What she did not realize was that she had just made the biggest mistake of her career. Because now the gloves were coming off. That night I made the most difficult phone call of my professional career. My handler, Special Agent Patricia Reeves, answered on the second ring. Morrison, what is your status? Compromised, they have Sarah. The line went quiet for several seconds. Patricia knew what my daughter meant to me, how carefully I had constructed this entire operation around keeping her safe while maintaining my cover. Tell me everything. I gave her a complete briefing on the previous 24 hours, from Sarah's removal from school to my confrontation with Sheriff Karen. Patricia listened without interruption, processing the tactical implications of our compromised position. She suspects, but she does not know, Patricia finally said. If she had solid intelligence on your real identity, you would already be dead. What about Sarah? We will find her, but we need to be smart about this. If we move too fast, Karen might panic and do something desperate. How long? Give me 48 hours. I am calling in favors from every agency contact I have in Pennsylvania. Child Services, Family Court, State Police. Someone will have a paper trail. 48 hours while my daughter is being held by a corrupt sheriff who knows I am not who I claim to be. Jake, I understand this is hell, but if you blow your cover now, 3 years of work disappears. And worse, Karen goes underground. We might never get another chance to dismantle her entire network. I hung up and spent the rest of the night packing my empty house, balancing my duty as a federal agent against my love for my daughter. But by morning, I had reached a decision that surprised even me. I was going to use both. The next day, I began the most intensive investigation of my career. Using resources I had hidden throughout Millbrook over the past 3 years, I started mapping Sheriff Karen's entire operation with methodical precision. The surveillance equipment in my garage had been recording every radio transmission in the county for months. I pulled the archived files and began searching for patterns, cross-referencing dates and times with official incident reports. What I discovered was staggering. Sheriff Karen Mitchell was not just corrupt. She was running a criminal enterprise that had been systematically looting the county for over a decade. Drug seizures that never made it to evidence storage. Property forfeitures that enriched her personal accounts. Federal grant money that disappeared into shell companies owned by her relatives. But the worst discovery was her use of Child Protective Services as a weapon against anyone who threatened her authority. Over the past 5 years, at least 12 families had been torn apart by fabricated abuse allegations, forcing parents to choose between fighting impossible legal battles or simply leaving town. The pattern was always the same: anonymous tips, emergency removals, biased investigations conducted by social workers who owed their jobs to Karen's political influence, family court judges who rubber-stamped her recommendations without question. Sarah was just the latest victim in a long line of children, used as hostages to silence their parents. I cross-referenced the victim families with property records and discovered another horrifying pattern. 7 of the targeted families had owned businesses or properties that were later acquired by Karen's associates at below-market prices. The children were returned only after their parents signed over assets or agreed to leave town permanently. This was not just corruption. It was organized extortion using kidnapped children as leverage. My encrypted phone buzzed with a text from Patricia, located Sarah, state facility in Harrisburg, transferred under emergency interstate compact. Legal removal will take 72 hours minimum through proper channels. 72 hours. 3 more days while my daughter sat in a facility 200 miles away, probably wondering why her father had abandoned her. But now I had a choice. I could wait for federal bureaucracy to slowly grind through proper legal channels while Sarah remained in custody. Or I could end this immediately using the evidence I had just uncovered. I made copies of everything. Radio transmissions proving coordination between Karen and corrupt judges. Financial records showing money laundering through county accounts. Documentation of at least 8 other families who had been victimized by the same tactics currently being used against me. It was enough to destroy Karen's entire network and send half the county government to federal prison. But first, I needed to get my daughter back, and I needed to do it in a way that would expose Karen's crimes so completely that she could never hurt another family. I was done playing defense. It was time to set a trap. The plan I developed was risky, but it played perfectly to Sheriff Karen's greatest weakness: her inability to resist abusing her power when she thought she was winning. I spent the next day making myself visible around town, playing the role of a desperate father whose world was falling apart. I visited the courthouse asking about legal aid. I called social services demanding updates. I even showed up at the local newspaper, begging them to investigate Sarah's disappearance. Each public appearance was designed to reach Karen's network of informants, building a narrative that Jake Morrison was spiraling out of control and becoming increasingly dangerous. The bait was irresistible. On Thursday evening, I received exactly the phone call I had been expecting. "Mr. Morrison, this is Deputy Collins. Sheriff Mitchell needs you to come to your garage immediately. We have received reports of suspicious activity on your property." "What kind of suspicious activity?" "Just meet us there, sir. Do not bring anyone with you." "Perfect." I arrived at Morrison Auto Repair to find Sheriff Karen's patrol car parked directly in front of my bay doors. She emerged from the vehicle flanked by two deputies, carrying what appeared to be an official search warrant. But this time, I was ready for her. Every square inch of my garage was now under surveillance by equipment sophisticated enough to record conversations from inside a moving vehicle at 50 yards. Hidden cameras with night vision capability. Audio pickups sensitive enough to detect whispered conversations. Digital recording systems that automatically uploaded to secure federal servers in real time. Sheriff Karen was about to make her final mistake, and every word would be preserved in crystal clarity. "Mr. Morrison, thank you for coming so quickly." "What is this about, Sheriff?" She handed me the search warrant with that familiar smug expression. "We have received credible information that you are storing illegal substances on this property." I examined the warrant carefully, noting the suspicious formatting and questionable legal language. "This looks like the same phony paperwork you used to kidnap my daughter." "Careful, Mr. Morrison. False accusations against law enforcement officers can result in additional charges." "Additional charges for what? You have been holding my daughter for 3 days without telling me where she is or when I can see her." "Your daughter is exactly where she needs to be until we resolve these very serious concerns about your activities." Karen nodded to her deputies, who began searching my garage with obvious pre-knowledge of where to look. They went directly to a toolbox in the corner that I had deliberately prepared for this moment. Deputy Collins opened the toolbox and immediately stepped back, his expression shifting from confidence to confusion. Instead of whatever planted evidence they had expected to find, the toolbox contained detailed financial records, radio transcripts, and photographs documenting Karen's criminal enterprise. "What is this?" Collins asked. Karen pushed past him and examined the contents of the toolbox herself. As she realized what she was looking at, her face went pale. "Where did you get these documents?" "The same place I got recordings of you coordinating with Judge Harrison to falsify custody orders. The same place I got bank records showing your personal accounts receiving deposits from evidence seizures. The same place I got testimony from 8 other families you have victimized using identical tactics." "You are bluffing." "Am I? Then explain how I know about the Hendricks family from 2 years ago, or the Petersons who lost their farm after you accused them of child neglect, or the Gonzalez family who signed over their restaurant to avoid having their son sent to foster care in Pittsburgh." Each name hit Karen like a physical blow. Her confident demeanor cracked as she realized the scope of what I had uncovered. "Who are you?" "I am exactly who you suspected I was, Sheriff. The question is, what are you going to do about it?" That was when Sheriff Karen Mitchell made her final, fatal mistake. Instead of backing down or attempting to negotiate, she doubled down on the only strategy she had ever known. Deputies, arrest this man for obstruction of justice and interfering with a federal investigation. The irony was delicious, and it was all being recorded. Deputy Collins hesitated, his hand hovering over his handcuffs as he processed what he had just heard. "Sheriff, did you say federal investigation?" "I misspoke. County investigation. Arrest him." But the damage was already done. Karen's slip had revealed that she knew more about my identity than she had previously admitted, and in her panic, she was about to make an even bigger mistake. "Actually, gentlemen, before anyone gets arrested, I think introductions are in order." I reached slowly into my jacket pocket, making sure both deputies could see my movements clearly. What I withdrew was not a weapon or identification that Jake Morrison, small-town mechanic, should have possessed. It was a gold federal badge and credentials identifying Special Agent Jake Morrison, Federal Bureau of Investigation. The silence in that garage was absolute. Deputy Collins actually dropped his handcuffs. The other deputy, Rodriguez, took an involuntary step backward, but Sheriff Karen's reaction was the most telling of all. She did not look surprised. "Agent Morrison," she said slowly, testing the words, "how long have you been investigating me?" 3 years, 2 months, and 16 days. "And you used your daughter as cover for a federal operation." "I used my daughter as motivation to expose a corrupt sheriff who has been terrorizing families in this county for over a decade." Karen's mind was working frantically, searching for some angle that might salvage her situation. Entrapment. This entire operation was entrapment. You created false scenarios to manipulate me into taking actions I would never have taken otherwise. Did I force you to kidnap my daughter? Did I force you to falsify court documents? Did I force you to coordinate with corrupt judges and social workers to tear apart innocent families? You were operating under false pretenses. Everything you have done here is inadmissible. Everything I have done here is completely legal and properly authorized by federal warrant. But everything you have done here, I gestured to the recording equipment that was capturing our conversation in real time. That is a different story. Deputy Collins found his voice. "Sheriff, is this true? Have you been falsifying reports?" Collins, shut up and arrest him. "With respect, Sheriff, I am not arresting a federal agent without understanding exactly what is happening here." Rodriguez had already moved away from Karen, his loyalty clearly shifting as the implications of the situation became clear. "Sheriff, where exactly is Mr. Morrison's daughter?" That was the question that broke her composure completely. "Sarah is in protective custody where she belongs until we sort out this mess." "Sarah is in a state facility in Harrisburg because you filed false emergency transfer documents," I said. "She has been asking for her father for 3 days while you played your sick power games. She was in danger. You brought federal heat to this county." "I brought federal justice to this county. There is a difference." My phone buzzed with an incoming call, Patricia's number. I had been expecting this call for the past hour. "Agent Morrison." "Jake, we are moving. Federal units are 10 minutes out. Get clear of the building." "Negative. I am exactly where I need to be." I hung up and looked directly at Sheriff Karen Mitchell, for what I knew would be the last time she held any authority over anyone. "In approximately 8 minutes, this building is going to be surrounded by federal agents. They are going to arrest you for kidnapping, corruption, money laundering, civil rights violations, and conspiracy to commit extortion. Your network of corrupt judges and social workers is being rolled up simultaneously. Your financial accounts are being frozen. Your illegal search of my property has just been recorded in its entirety. This is not over. Actually, it is. Sarah is being released into federal custody as we speak. She will be home tonight. You, on the other hand, are going to federal prison for a very long time. Karen's final act of defiance was to try to destroy the evidence she had discovered in my toolbox. But as she reached for the documents, both of her deputies moved to stop her. "Sheriff, do not make this worse," Collins said quietly. That was when we heard the helicopters approaching. Federal agents had a saying about operations like this one: justice delayed is justice denied. After 3 years of watching Sheriff Karen Mitchell abuse her power and terrorize innocent families, justice was finally arriving in Millbrook. And it was arriving with enough force to ensure that she would never hurt another child again. The media circus that erupted after Karen's arrest was unlike anything Sleepy Millbrook had ever experienced. By Friday morning, news vans from Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, and New York were parked outside the courthouse, their satellite dishes reaching toward a sky that seemed clearer than it had in years. I watched the coverage from my living room, Sarah curled up beside me on the couch, finally safe in her own home. She had been through hell during those 3 days in state custody, but her resilience amazed me. Children are tougher than we give them credit for, especially when they know they are loved unconditionally. "Dad, are you really an FBI agent?" she asked during a commercial break. "I really am. I am sorry I could not tell you before now." Was everything else a lie too? That question cut deeper than any interrogation I had ever endured. "No, sweetheart. Being your father is the most real thing in my life. Everything else was just a job." The story was already being called the biggest corruption scandal in Pennsylvania history. Federal prosecutors had arrested 17 people in coordinated raids across 3 counties. Sheriff Karen Mitchell was being held without bail pending trial on 43 separate charges. But the human cost was becoming clear as other victims came forward. The Hendricks family had driven down from Ohio to speak with federal investigators. Maria Hendricks broke down crying as she described how Karen had used fabricated abuse allegations to force them to sell their farm at a fraction of its value before fleeing the county. "We lost everything," she sobbed. "Our home, our business, our community. Our children still have nightmares about being taken away by strangers." The Peterson family had been destroyed even more completely. After fighting Karen's allegations for 2 years, they had divorced under the stress and given up custody of their son voluntarily rather than continue subjecting him to the trauma of ongoing legal battles. 8 families, 23 children, millions of dollars in stolen assets, a decade of systematic abuse of power that had gone unchecked because Karen had successfully corrupted every institution that might have stopped her. The political fallout extended far beyond Millbrook. Governor Richards called for a complete investigation of family court procedures statewide. The Pennsylvania Attorney General announced the formation of a special task force to identify similar corruption in other rural counties. But the most satisfying moment came when Judge Harrison was led away in handcuffs from his courthouse office. This was the man who had rubber-stamped Karen's fraudulent custody orders, who had enriched himself by seizing property from terrorized families, who had perverted justice for personal gain. His arrest made the front page of every newspaper in the state. The local reaction was more complex. Many residents were genuinely shocked by the scope of Karen's crimes. They had seen her as a tough but effective sheriff who kept crime low and maintained order. The revelation that she had been the biggest criminal in the county shattered their faith in local institutions. But others had suspected for years that something was wrong. Business owners whispered about protection money disguised as donation requests. Parents shared stories about avoiding certain deputies who seemed to enjoy intimidating families during routine traffic stops. "We knew she was mean," one grocery store owner told a reporter, "but we never imagined she was stealing children." The psychological trauma extended beyond the immediate victims. Every parent in Millbrook was now forced to confront the terrifying reality that their own children could have been targeted if they had crossed Sheriff Karen at the wrong moment. Sarah's school brought in counselors to help students process the news that their sheriff had been arrested for kidnapping. Several teachers admitted they had always felt uncomfortable with how quickly Karen could remove children from homes, but they had never questioned the system because they trusted it to protect kids. My own position became complicated as news of the operation spread. Some people viewed me as a hero who had exposed corruption and saved their community. Others resented that I had deceived them for 3 years, living among them under false pretenses while investigating their elected officials. "How do we know you are not still spying on us?" one customer asked when he came to pick up his repaired transmission. "Because Sheriff Karen was the target," I replied. "The investigation is complete." But I understood his suspicion. Trust, once broken, is difficult to rebuild. The fact that I had been an undercover federal agent protecting their community would always be overshadowed by the fact that I had lied to them about who I was. The hardest conversation was with Sarah's teacher, Mrs. Henderson, who had become genuinely fond of my daughter during the school year. "I feel so foolish," she said. "All those parent conferences, all those conversations about Sarah's progress, and I never suspected you were anyone other than a devoted single father." "That part was never an act," I assured her. "Everything about being Sarah's father is completely real." 6 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse in Philadelphia watching Sheriff Karen Mitchell receive the justice she had denied so many others. The trial had been swift and decisive, her conviction inevitable given the overwhelming evidence of her crimes. Federal prosecutors had painted a devastating picture of corruption that reached into every corner of county government. Bank records showed over $2 million in illegal payments flowing through accounts controlled by Karen and her associates. Audio recordings captured her coordinating with judges to falsify court orders. Testimony from victims revealed a pattern of systematic abuse spanning more than a decade. Karen's defense attorneys had tried everything. They claimed entrapment, arguing that my undercover operation had induced her to commit crimes she would never have attempted otherwise. They questioned the legality of federal surveillance in local law enforcement matters. They even suggested that Karen was herself a victim of a justice system that had failed to provide adequate oversight and training. None of it worked. The evidence was too comprehensive, the pattern of abuse too clear, the testimony from victims too compelling. After deliberating for less than 4 hours, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all 43 counts. Judge Patricia Weinstein did not mince words during sentencing. "Sheriff Mitchell, you have betrayed every principle of law enforcement and public service. You used your badge not to protect and serve, but to terrorize and exploit. You weaponized child protective services against innocent families. You corrupted judges and social workers to enable your criminal enterprise. Most heinously, you kidnapped children to extort their parents." Karen stood silently as the judge continued. The children you traumatized will carry scars from your actions for the rest of their lives. The families you destroyed may never fully recover. The community you were sworn to protect has been left with deep wounds that will take years to heal. I sentence you to 37 years in federal prison, without possibility of parole. The courtroom erupted in applause from the gallery filled with Karen's victims and their families. I felt Sarah squeeze my hand as we watched the woman who had stolen her being led away in shackles. But the victory felt incomplete. Judge Harrison received 22 years for his role in the conspiracy. 3 social workers received sentences ranging from 5 to 12 years. Deputy Collins, who had cooperated with federal investigators, received probation and was allowed to keep his pension. The financial settlements were substantial but inadequate. Federal court ordered the seizure of all assets obtained through Karen's criminal enterprise, creating a victim compensation fund worth approximately $4 million. Each affected family would receive payments to help rebuild their lives, but money could not restore destroyed relationships or erase traumatic memories. The Hendricks family used their settlement to buy a small farm in Ohio, starting over in a community where their children could heal without constant reminders of their trauma. The Petersons were able to reunite and regain custody of their son, though their marriage remained fragile after years of legal battles. For Sarah and me, the decision about our future was more complex. Millbrook had been our home for 3 years, longer than we had lived anywhere since her mother died. Sarah had friends here, teachers who cared about her, a community that knew her name. But it was also the place where she had been kidnapped by a corrupt sheriff, where her father had lived under false pretenses for years, where every conversation with neighbors now carried the weight of our complicated history. "Do you want to leave?" I asked her one evening as we sat on our front porch, watching the sunset paint the Pennsylvania hills in shades of gold and purple. "I do not know," she replied honestly. "Mrs. Henderson wants me to stay for 7th grade. She says I am the best science student she has ever taught." "What do you want?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, processing emotions that were far too complex for a 12-year-old to carry. "I want things to go back to the way they were before, when you were just my dad who fixed cars and helped me with homework." "I am still that person, sweetheart. The badge does not change how much I love you." But everything else has changed. People look at us differently now. They whisper when we walk past. Some of them think you are a hero. Others think you are a liar who used his daughter to catch criminals. Her perception was heartbreakingly accurate. The community remained divided about my role in exposing Karen's corruption. Many families were grateful that I had ended years of systematic abuse, but others resented the deception, feeling manipulated by someone they had trusted as a neighbor and friend. "What if we stayed for 1 more year?" I suggested. "Let you finish middle school here with your friends. Then we could make a fresh start somewhere new." "Would you stop being an FBI agent?" That question had been haunting me for months. The Bureau wanted me to continue undercover work, leveraging my success in Millbrook to investigate corruption in other small towns across rural America. But the cost of living a double life had become too high. "I am thinking about taking a teaching position at the FBI Academy, training new agents how to conduct undercover operations. That way I could use what I learned here to help other people, but we could have a normal life." Sarah smiled for the first time in our conversation. Normal sounds good. 3 months later, we packed our belongings and left Millbrook for the final time. I had sold Morrison Auto Repair to one of my former customers, an honest mechanic who would maintain the business, without the complications of federal surveillance equipment hidden in the walls. As we drove past the courthouse where Karen's mugshot still hung in the sheriff's department lobby, Sarah asked one final question. "Dad, do you think we made a difference?" I thought about the 8 families who could sleep peacefully knowing their children were safe. I thought about the corrupt network that would never again terrorize innocent people. I thought about the reforms being implemented across Pennsylvania to prevent future abuse. Yes, sweetheart, we made a difference. The story of Sheriff Karen Mitchell became a case study taught at police academies and law schools across the country. Federal agencies developed new protocols for investigating small-town corruption. Child Protective Services implemented additional oversight procedures to prevent the weaponization of custody laws. But for me, the most important outcome was simpler. My daughter was safe. The monster who had stolen her was in prison, and we were finally free to build a life based on truth instead of deception. Justice had been served. The price had been high, but some battles are worth fighting regardless of the cost. Because in the end, protecting the people we love is the most important job any of us will ever have.